In the modern day, I can't really think of fewer places I would rather avoid than a corporate environment. Having worked in one for several years until recently, something about it always felt weirdly unsettling. And I'm not the only person who feels that way. Over the past decade, so many pieces of media have come out exploring the mental toll that these places have on us and the ways in which the workplace can dehumanize us. One of the most recent and well-known examples of this is Apple TV's Severance, a show about a workplace where the staff's memories of the outside world are severed from their memories inside of work. This results in the characters essentially having two personalities, the outie being their usual day-to-day self, and the innie being the person they are inside of work. The innie knows nothing about the outside world at all. The only thing they know is life inside of their windowless office with cold white walls, thin carpets, fluorescent light bulbs. It all has a very sterile feeling to it. Their workplace is located in the basement of Lumen Industries, the company they work for, and everything about it is so artificial and clearly man-made, yet somehow inhuman. The cold blues and whites of the office feel lifeless and overly sanitized. Labyrinthian hallways are designed to confuse employees and keep them isolated from each other without them actually thinking they're isolated. The only stimuli are paintings and documents about the founder of the company, Keir Egan, portraying him as this religious, saviour-like figure who guides his employees to satisfaction through the work they do in his name. And the severed employees know of nothing else, so what reason do they have to doubt any of it? This cult-like behaviour is then further enforced by the company's management, perhaps most notably in the character Mr. Milchick. Mr. Milchick is their supervisor and is portrayed brilliantly by Tramble Tillman, and he speaks to his employees in such a friendly yet artificial manner. He feels like a machine replicating human emotion, responding to concerns and questions in an overly formal dialect, telling his employees that they're wrong or they should simply focus on the work. And if they act out or break the rules, his friendly demeanour changes from something that's still calm, but something about his mannerisms changes. You can feel the anger, even though he's still talking in a perfectly calm manner. At this point, you've gone from being an employee to being a problem that he wants to get rid of. But what if you don't lash out? What if you do the exact opposite? What if you are a perfect model employee? Then your good work is rewarded with paltry excuses for rewards. Little fidget toys like finger traps, maybe you get an extra vending machine token. And if that doesn't seem like a substantial reward for all the hard work you've done, well then you're just ungrateful. The problem isn't the reward, the problem is you. That doesn't mean that larger, more substantial rewards don't exist, but these also have their own sanitized interpretations. A party isn't a party, it's a music and dance experience in a large empty room with pre-approved selections of music. Your waffle party for being the best performing team member is a single plate in an isolated room surrounded with corporate propaganda. But what if your insubordination goes too far? What if you need to be punished? Your behaviour needs to be corrected. In those instances, you are sent to the break room to apologise for being not just a bad worker, but a bad person, because you yourself are the problem. The company can't be the problem because, well, they were generous enough to let you work for them. They may have pushed you, but only because they care about you. They want you to be the best person you can be. Don't you want to be the best person you can be? The company can only be the problem when things get too out of hand, when people from the outside world are aware of the problem. But how are people outside going to learn about all of this that's happening? As soon as you step outside to tell them, you no longer exist. So there's a lot there that we could dissect and look into, but the main thing that I want to focus on is the cult-like mentality and how it pertains to corporations in the current day. The similarity that hits me the hardest is probably the gaslighting, the way employees are told that they're valued, but they aren't really treated like it. They're given very little in terms of incentive or reward, but they don't know what else there is, so how would they know they're being undervalued or mistreated? When they're taken to the break room, there is no conversation to try and find out why they may have gone against the rules. They're just simply told that they are the problem. The worker is just a worker, and the company is doing them a favour by correcting them. It's oddly reminiscent of how a lot of companies tell their employees they're valued, but when it's time to give them raises, they're below inflation, meaning that people essentially earn less and less despite working just as hard, if not harder than they were 5 years prior. And when someone inevitably complains, they're told that there's simply not enough money to give everyone the same raise, despite the executives' bonuses being in the millions. Severance plays with those ideas of how companies treat their workers, taking away so much of the workers' power to fight for more. Employees are essentially powerless to the faceless entities that control their lives, whether they realise it or not, and whether they like it or not. And if an innie decides that they want to resign, that resignation has to be approved by their outside persona, and in some cases, that can result in them essentially being trapped there, because the outside persona might really need the money or have some other reason for wanting to stay employed at a place where they don't know what happens. Because whatever bad stuff happens down there, for all intents and purposes, it simply isn't their problem. And why would they care about an injustice that isn't happening to them? Signalis is a 2022 survival horror game set in an underground mining facility on a mysterious planet. You play as a replica, a synthetic clone of another person created with the express purpose of fulfilling a certain role. A very clear similarity to the replicants found in Blade Runner. The protagonist is Elster, a technician replica tasked with finding the human pilot of her ship after a crash landing at a strange mining facility. The plot has you delving deeper and deeper into the facility, eventually discovering what went wrong here and how the facility came to be so infested with monsters. But I'm not planning on delving deep into the entire plot of Signalis. That's an entirely separate video in its own right, and frankly, I just think you should experience the game for yourself. But there are some elements of the facility that I do want to touch upon. As you progress through the game, you can find employee profiles for several of the replicas that work throughout the mining facility, which mostly contain information that's eerily mundane or reports of the events leading up to the present. But the part of this that I find the scariest, or the creepiest rather, is that the company logs employees' fixations and pleasures, and uses these to manipulate and control them, taking away their lone sources of comfort only to drip feed them back based on numbers, reports, and spreadsheets. They even manipulate workers into developing new desires, fetishes, friendships, relationships, with the express intent of using it as leverage to control them further. Biologically, they are essentially human, but they aren't people, just tools to be maintained, stored, and used for further profit. This obviously results in some problems. Sentient beings don't tend to like being controlled and manipulated and having their sole sources of comfort removed from them. The replicas can sometimes become too obsessed, causing them to behave erratically or violently when they can't get what they want, what they might even need. The company struggles to control them, but they aren't people, not legally at least. And when someone isn't legally a person, they lose the legal rights that come with it. And the company that owns them can just throw them away, dispose of them, and carry on like nothing ever happened, as though that life never even existed. Which is a lot more convenient than just simply firing someone. They might come back with a lawsuit or a social media campaign against you, but if they're tossed into the garbage disposal to never see light again, then they're no longer anybody's problem. In a way, this is pretty much the ideal situation for a company. They don't have to worry about employment laws, they don't have to worry about keeping their employees happy. They might have to buy a new employee at some point, but if that breaks, they can just buy a new one. Maybe get it repaired. But what would repair even mean in terms of a sentient being? For a situation such as this, the best thing a person can be is broken. They have no hope, no desires, no dreams. They just exist to keep plodding along, keep trying to do the only thing that they know how to do. And that would break me. That would probably break you, but this is the ideal worker. One without any real risk of consequences. But corporate horror isn't just a problem for the workers, it's a problem for the consumers and the general public, as they're also victims to the shapeless conglomerates. This brings us closer to more dystopian factors, basic necessities being cut off for those without money. Cycles of nepotism that keep the rich in power and the not so rich under the illusion that they can reach power too if they just work hard enough. But the corporations control everything. So your money just goes back to them, the cards just go back to them, and they're always stacked against you. This, though, can just be seen as putting a different lens onto elements of a cyberpunk dystopia. But can't we say that about most of what I've been talking about? Sure, some of it may not have the cyberpunk elements, but there is absolutely a dystopic side to it all. But going back to dystopia, I was originally going to write this final section on The Outer Worlds and how that game presents the corporate dystopia in a more light-hearted parody style as opposed to something scary and horrifying. Then I was going to use that to discuss how we separate horror from non-horror with these topics. But then something happened. As I was midway through writing this video, Microsoft announced layoffs for over 9,000 employees, despite making record profits. More money than they have ever made before, more money than they have ever had before, more money than most people in history have ever thought fathomable. I'm now going to read an excerpt from the email that was sent out to people, not workers, people, in Microsoft's gaming division, announcing these layoffs. Prioritizing our opportunities is essential, but that does not lessen the significance of this moment. Simply put, we would not be where we are today without the time, energy, and creativity of those whose roles are impacted. These decisions are not a reflection of the talent, creativity, and dedication of the people involved. Our momentum is not accidental. It is the result of years of dedicated effort from our teams. I could comb through this email and so many more from so many other companies for examples that get the same point across. But I think this section really says it best. What this email basically told people is, the company needs you, but you do not matter. And this is what, not just Microsoft, what a plethora of modern corporations boil down to. A shapeless, formless, inhuman entity that disguises itself as human but only cares about chasing that high from watching numbers go up. These companies need you, and they despise that, so they make you rely on it for sustenance, for safety, seeking to control you by making you fear what could happen if it cuts you off from your income. You will be a good worker for the company, because if you are detached from it, then your savings are finite, and that's assuming you're lucky enough to even have any savings. Your clock is suddenly ticking down, you need to start making money again and fast. Just now for another formless entity. Because if you don't, then you'll be out on the street, cold, alone, and isolated. Is that not horrifying? That your survival could rely on the satisfaction of something that despises you, and will just throw you away for nothing whilst telling you that you did everything right. As time goes on, we're seeing this more and more. Rampant layoffs across scores of industries, workers' rights are being stripped away as AI is brought in to replace us, doing a worse job but without the need for those pesky employment rights. Attempts to unionize and fight back being countered with ending careers or even lives. As these shapeless monsters use their hordes of wealth to buy politicians and power whilst developing new ways to exhaust us and take away our methods of fighting back, faster than the law can legislate against them. All many of us can do is survive, unfulfilled and discontent with our lives outside of a few fleeting moments. And most media that explores corporate horror presents it as inhumanly as it can. Sometimes that's robotically making decisions for the betterment of an imaginary entity that fall under logic without compassion, regardless of the human consequences. Sometimes that's the brute, animalistic slashing of a hungry, monstrous beast devouring its prey for all the nutrients it can and tossing the carcass aside to be forgotten. Either way you look at it, we're forced to survive off these things just because they need us to survive. It's an Ouroboros with the corporation as the head and the workers as the tail. But the head keeps telling the tail how important it is whilst it's eating it. And no matter how long the snake is, it will eventually eat itself because its hunger will never be satiated. I originally started writing this script because I felt inspired after watching Severance. Seriously, it's a really good show that explores this topic, and many other topics, brilliantly. But then reality hit with another cold reminder. I was laid off from my job this year, just like so many other people have been. There was no real reason for it. My company wasn't struggling for money. In fact, they're currently doing better than they ever have done. But that doesn't matter. I don't matter. Because the real corporate horror doesn't happen in movies, TV shows, games, books, or any creative medium. The real corporate horror is the kind that we have to put up with every single day.